as Christoph mentioned at the beginning of the talk today, the presentation will be about finding this quite thin balance between innovating and changing certain instruments in general social surveys. And for this presentation, I do want to share with you what we have done in the project ALLBUS with respect to value measurement. For the presentation today, I envision such an overview whereas first I will give a short introduction into the ALLBUS program, basically repeating or reminding you what Christoph also mentioned at the beginning. And then I would like to discuss with you a bit this idea of replicating and innovating certain measurement instruments. And then I will continue in the last three parts of the presentation with giving you a description of how values are measured in the ALLBUS program, and then applying what I have presented in the previous two sections with respect to what we have done exactly to try to find the balance between innovating and replicating value measurements in ALLBUS. And then I really want to end the presentation with some food for thought. And of course, I would be very happy to hear about your comments and especially your questions if you have any of those. So let me start briefly with presenting the ALLBUS program. You have already heard that ALLBUS program is it's a long-running program in Germany that facilitates data on certain societal issues in the country. It is an instrument that monitors societal change and many other social phenomena over time. And one of the, let's say, benefits of using ALLBUS is that it's very well documented and it allows for replicability in terms of both the research per se, but also in terms of how certain phenomena are being recorded in the program. The ALLBUS program itself is being recorded every 2 years, so data for the program is recorded every 2 years since 1980. And the study design itself, it's what experts call the two-stage sampling design of individuals 18 years of age or older. And other thing that probably makes ALLBUS stand out on the market of social surveys in Germany is that the time series, so the continuous measurement of certain phenomena or constructs, differ in length and in frequency. So whereas some of them are being regularly addressed, other questions are being addressed at different periods of time. And I think this nicely illustrates that ALLBUS covers a lot of topics with respect to the social reality in Germany. And on this background, I want to continue with you the discussion of why do we address now this topic of replicating and innovation. Some of you may have or may be aware of the innovation that is happening now in the field of astrophysics. And if for those who are not familiar with this, what the image shows here, this is a Southern Ring Nebula. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see an image that the Hubble telescope took in 1998. And on the right-hand screen, we see an image or a photo that the James Webb telescope took in 2022. And I think this is a nice illustration of what we are trying to achieve with in this presentation, but also when we talk about replicating and innovating measurement instruments. If the Hubble telescope took a very blurry image of the Southern Ring Nebula in 1998, one was left with the impression that we don't have enough information, or we don't have enough power to go through the noise that is out there with respect to understanding this event in astrophysics. But then with improvements in the instrument itself, we are able to dissociate noise from the actual systematic patterns in the data. So we see a more clearer image that was transmitted by James Webb telescope. And it would be very interesting to have this also in terms of social sciences. And Christoph mentioned at the beginning also this dual, so to speak, laws of collecting data for social scientific purposes. So on the one hand is that of replicating by not changing the instrument, but on the other hand is to innovate because certain things or certain realities do change in societies, and we have already heard some examples. So for example, the gender roles are changing, or at least we are becoming more aware of the fact that there is a need to address this issue. So what do we understand then by replication and innovation in the context of ALLBUS? By replication, we do understand this idea of ensuring comparability with previous data and therefore continue to be able to trace back societal development in our observation. But then this comes at the cost of ignoring at times theoretical progress if the focus is just on replicating what has already been done. On the other hand, we do want to innovate. That is, we want to ensure reliability and accuracy in measuring certain abstract instruments, certain abstract concepts, so for example, values, gender roles, and so on. But the issue here is that this comes at the expense of long-term societal observation. That is, we are losing already available information that we have so effortfully collected over the years. Now, the ideal scenario here is to find a balance between the two. That is, to find the strategy that allows you on the one hand to continuously replicate what has already been done, but also innovate the measurement instruments and perhaps acknowledge the theoretical progress in the literature. Now, the issue here is that there is a lot of effort and a lot of thinking that needs to be put into such a strategy because it's never something that one can do ad hoc. And this is what I would like to share with you in the remaining of the presentation. The efforts that we have been done in the last few months with respect to finding this balance between replicating and innovating value measurement in the ALLBUS program. Now, I have already been discussing or addressing the concept of values for some time. And what do we understand by values is that, first of all, they are not a syndrome of modern society or modern times. That is, they are not something that we just discover now. They have been there since humanity has appeared. But it is the case that our understanding of this construct, this phenomena, has evolved dramatically over the recent decades. And here we have just two examples of contributors to the value theories and measurement: Edward Sprenger and Schwalm-Schwarz. What was the case with ALLBUS? Why did ALLBUS introduce value measurement? It was quite clear at the time in 2002 when the first value measurement was introduced in the program that on the background of such theoretical and empirical progress, it has been quite clear that values themselves as a construct can lend support for a lot of explanatory events and a lot of understanding to how certain behaviors occur in society. And once again, in 2002, values were introduced for the first time in the ALLBUS program. And the nice thing of the program itself is that there are three different approaches how values are being measured. We have on the one hand values at the individual level that has been already collected in 2002 and 2012 in a specific theory that I will address later. And the ALLBUS program also collects data on societal value expectations, although this was the case in 2002 with an instrument that was informed by the Kluckhohn value theory. And Kluckhohn, for those who are familiar with surveys in Germany, it's also the theory that informs value measurement in SOAP survey. A third instrument or a third approach to values in the ALLBUS program is the political values or the political goals, which is measured with the Engelhardt theory and index. Now, the question is, of course, why values and why should we consider innovating and replicating values now and not before? Well, the plan for 2023, so the next ALLBUS program, so the next data collection for ALLBUS is scheduled to be in the thematic module religion and worldviews. And this is the module where value measurement has been already included previously in the ALLBUS program, both because there are a lot of explanatory factors and outcome variables that one can use in combination with the value measurements. And on the background of preparing for 2023 data collection, we had an open discussion with the community to suggest improvement in questions or any new strategies that we can use in preparing the best possible program for 2023. And the feedback that we got kind of put us on a path to discuss the new developments in value theories with respect to what is happening at the individual level. If you remember from previously, I indicated that one way to measure values in the ALLBUS program is at the individual level, and it was in a theory of Helmut Klages. This theory was developed as an answer to the one-dimensional theoretical formulation by Ronald Engelhardt. So this was the case more than 20 years ago that an instrument was developed for measuring values in the Klages theory. And other aspects that came out during this discussion with the community was that this instrument seems to be mostly relevant in the German context, and also that the theory itself and the instrument, they are no longer developed if we are to consider the reality in the literature with respect to other theories and other instruments. And I've been talking about theories and instruments. This is just a brief family tree, so to speak, of the prominent value theories out there. And you can see that Klages and Gensiker is just one theory of the many, but it is related in some way with the other prominent theories out there. More relevant is that these theories, the international prominent theories, are informing indeed value measurement in Germany. And we see here the blue dots, the three theoretical formulations that inform 5 different surveys in Germany. This slide will come again at the end of my presentation. The observation that we had is that value theories in Germany are prominently 2 of them. One of them is the Schwarz value theory that discusses or addresses value orientation at the individual level. And this happens to be also the state-of-the-art theory in the international literature with respect to individual level orientations. On the other hand, we also see that Engelhardt and Welzel theory and instrument are highly represented in the German survey market, so to speak. But it is quite clear that this theoretical approach is more addressing values at, well, let's say a dynamic between individual in societies. And it's usually looked at from the perspective of what is happening at the cultural level. So if we want to talk about value orientations of individuals, we do have a state-of-the-art theory, Schwarz value theory. And now let's try to address this idea of how do we find a balance between replicating what has already been done in the ALLBUS program since 2002 in a theory that is mostly relevant in the German context and no longer developed, with innovating this instrument or this information that we have with respect to the state-of-the-art theoretical development from the international literature. So we have thought about a strategy, a 4-step strategy to try to look for this balance. The first question we addressed was, what is a feasible instrument that we can include in the program if we are to consider the strict limitations of space that we have in the questionnaire? Because a program like ALLBUS is usually very long survey, and because of that we want to have an instrument that is parsimonious, so short, but also is able to reproduce the theoretical aspects. The next question that we had is, are the older instruments, so the available data that we have collected with the Klages instrument, capable of reproducing the state-of-the-art theory? And then the last point that we addressed was, if we are to use this instrument that we have already included in the ALLBUS program to reproduce the state-of-the-art theory, are the associations with other constructs, that is with predictor variables or outcome variables, stable over time, or are they not? So this was the strategy that we thought about. And let me now address you the first point, that is, what is a good instrument, candidate instrument, to be included in the ALLBUS program? First of all, just a reminder, we have observed that in the literature, it is considered state-of-the-art, the theory of Shalom-Schwartz, the theory of basic human values. And this theoretical formulation suggests that values of individuals, so value orientations of people, are standard beliefs that are organized according to their content incompatibility. And it is this incompatibility between value contents that are guiding behavior of people in societies. Visually depicted, this is what the theory is suggesting, that there are some theories that are more similar, that have more similar content, and you will see here, for example, values of openness, there will be more neighboring contents, whereas those in oppositions, or those values that are kind of contradictory in nature, they will be exactly at the opposite pole of it. Now, for this theory to be applied, that is for us to have data from participants, for people, there are two potential instruments out there that the international literature is suggesting. But these instruments are very long, and because of that, we have looked at an alternative that, it so happens, can offer a very good solution to us, because this instrument, the Valigo, is an instrument that is tailored for multiple type of data collection, which is what ALLBUS is proposing. Then it is an instrument that allows a very good balance between ecologic/parsimonious assessment of a latent construct, and also it provides a reliable and highly valid measurement of that construct. And the other benefit of this instrument it is that it's specifically constructed for large-scale assessments such as ALLBUS program. So this was the candidate instrument that we had in mind. And for us to follow the next steps in our strategy, we have collected data with the help of our colleagues from survey design and methodology. We have collected a quota sample from about 800 participants, where we have included information, or we have asked participants the Valigo instruments and the Klages instruments. So the Valigo instrument is once more the candidate instrument to reproduce the state-of-the-art theory, whereas the Klages instrument is the instrument that has already been used in the ALLBUS program since 2002. And in addition, we have included a number of variables or questions, because we wanted to also test for the discriminant validity. If you remember, this was part of our strategy. So what are the results of this strategy that we came up with? First of all, if you remember, we wanted to see whether the instruments that we are looking at can reproduce the state-of-the-art theory. And this is just the result of a multidimensional scaling, which shows us that if we are to plot the items of the Klages instrument, here depicted in blue, and of the candidate instrument, here depicted in red, we do see that what the Schwartz theory is suggesting can be reproduced. The Schwartz theory is suggesting again that there are a number of values that can be organized in a circular fashion, and these values are being organized according to their incompatibility structure. So we see here that this multidimensional scale reproduces this structure very nicely. We see openness to change on the one hand that is in contradiction with conservation, so something that we intuitively also would expect. We have also here prepared, if the discussion requires later on, the actual organization of these items into the Schwartz value theory, but I would like to move on the discussion for now. Of course, when we are looking at new measurements, we do want to have reliable measurement. And this is what the table here is showing. When we are to replicate the Schwartz theory, so here I'm talking about the four most parsimonious value typologies that Schwartz is proposing. So we have here openness to change, self-enhancement, conservation, and self-transcendence. So when we are constructing these indices, following the schemata that are presented in the previous two slides, we do see that we end up having quite reliable instruments. And the same goes for those constructs from the ALLBUS program that we have included in this quota sample, such as migration attitudes, gender roles, or religious fundamentalism. Now, we see that the instruments can reproduce a theory. We see that we have reliable instruments, but can these reliable instruments predict or be associated with our predictors and outcome variable in a similar manner? Well, this is what the table is here showing. You see in, well, I would say orange, highlighted here, those cases that the two instruments diverge. So, for example, we have the conservation value typology constructed with the Klages instrument and with the Valigo instrument. And we do see that in the case of gender roles and religious fundamentalism, the direction of associations are different. But with respect to the other associations, this seems to be, well, first of all, in the similar direction, and also in a majority of cases, also in terms of magnitude of association. Now, we have information about theory, instruments, but can we use the previous data that was collected in the ALLBUS program to replicate or to reproduce the Schwartz theory? And I think the answer to that is quite surprisingly for some, but quite optimistically for us and for the users. Yes, we can do that. And what we see here on this slide is, again, the results of multidimensional scaling that we have conducted on data collected in 2002 and 2012. That is, we have here the Klages items being able to reproduce the four quadrants that the Schwartz theory is suggesting. So this is also indication that we can use the state-of-the-art theory to reproduce, we can use available data to reproduce the state-of-the-art theory from the literature. And then the next step was to identify whether there is stability across the measurement points with respect to associating the value indices in the new theoretical formulation of Schwartz. And here you can see four different variables. We have age, the first two quadrants, then the next two quadrants we have attitudes towards migration, the next one is political interest, and then the last one we have life satisfaction. And just briefly to summarize here, we see quite a stable tendency or pattern over the years. That is, 2002 and 2012 data seem to be very stable with respect to associations between value indices and these four constructs that we have selected from the ALLBUS program. Now, to briefly summarize, how do we knit a solution to the question, can we find a balance between replicating an instrument so that is not changing the measurement to be stable in our observation, and innovating so that we are not missing out on theoretical progress? I think the message here is that with respect to the efforts that we have done in the ALLBUS program, we see that the candidate instrument, the Valigo instrument, measuring supposedly, that is expected to measure the Schwarz theory. So this candidate instrument and the instruments from the ALLBUS program can both reproduce the state-of-the-art theory. We also have reliable scales or indices that we can construct. And in majority of cases, they are very good Cronbach alphas. We also see, however, that the discriminant ability, that is the ability for our constructed indices to predict certain constructs, is in many cases similar between the two instruments, whereas in some cases this is, well, not ideal to our expectations. So I think in this case we are advising cautions with respect to interpreting this. So using the data, the available data, in the way that we have suggested. But overall, we do see a lot of evidence with respect to stability if we are to use the previous data and replicate the theoretical formulation of Schwarz. So what can we do in 2023, so with the next data collection, with respect to value measurement? So ALLBUS is proposing or planning in 2023 to continue measuring the political value orientations proposed by Engelhardt, so the same measurement as before. And now we are proposing to measure individual value orientations with two instruments in split. That is, a certain part of participants will receive the candidate instrument for reproducing the Schwarz theory, and another part of the participants will receive the Klages-Gensiker instrument, that is the instrument that has already been used since 2002 twice in the ALLBUS program. Now, this is the case for 2023, but I would like to get closer to ending my presentation with some food for thought. This is a question to us all. Are we missing out on research opportunities and policy-making opportunity if we are not using available data resources from long-running surveys? And am I asking this, or this is a question here because we are noticing theoretical progress in the literature with respect to certain phenomena, certain observations, and so on. And then there is an implicit tendency at times to consider that if a certain data is not measured in a particular theory, then we cannot use this data. But I think that what we are trying to show here with the results is that at times we can't find this balance between using available data and reproducing based on this data new theories. However, this is time consuming, and at times this is an answer to a question whether we want to continue with something that is outdated or we want to focus solely on drastic changes. Well, we have seen that we can find a balance, and we can do that and at the same time be aware of certain limitations in our work and in our attempts. For example, for the ALLBUS 2023, we will expect to have data on individual value orientations. In cases that there will be some changes in the time series between 2002, 2012, and respectively 2023, these time series changes in the time series we do recommend to be interpreted carefully. So it is not necessarily a syndrome of changes in value orientations of people, and because of that, one should be aware of the results that we have briefly presented today. Another aspect is that Schwarz value theory is still developing, so it's not an established in the sense that nothing can be added to it. And because of that, the theory itself can be replaced in the future with newer state-of-the-art ones. And this again will go back to the beginning of the cycle of how do we find a balance between replicating what is already done and innovating with respect to newer developments. Now imagine that these efforts are not in vain. Imagine that these efforts have a higher goal, so to speak. Imagine that by having such questions in our programs, so for example in the ALLBUS project, but also in other projects out there in Germany, we can eventually strive to integrate surveys and theories with respect to value measurement. And this plot here that you are seeing is a what if. That is, currently in the ISSP there is no Schwarz theory represented, but it can be done if one is to go on this path that we have done already in the ALLBUS program. So this was all from my side. I do want to thank you for your attention, and I'm very curious about what your thoughts are, and if you have any suggestions on how to move forward with this topic.